She knew exactly what her brand felt like in her head, but when it came to figuring out how to translate that into visuals, she just wasn't sure how to make it happen. Today we're going to be talking about Cara, the owner of Caricia Events brand photo shoot, what went into planning it, designing it, and why she's now walked away with images that match that brand that she's had in her head this whole time. Welcome to the Heart Align brand. I'm your host, Leanne, brand strategist, photographer, and mentor with over 5 years experience helping women and queer-owned businesses build brands rooted in their truth. This is a space for thoughtful conversations about building a business that actually supports your life, where strategy meets self-trust and success doesn't require self-abandonment. We're going to be going behind the scenes of a client photo shoot. A brand photo shoot isn't just a photo shoot that is meant to give you photos that look good. They are photos meant to communicate thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And I think a lot of people who have never done a brand photo shoot before focus on the final end product of the pretty photo. And a lot of times, what they end up finding is that they're disappointed with the end result because they may have a handful of photos that they love. But when it comes to actually applying and using those photos in their branding, they find that those photos that they got from their shoot don't work. So, this is a podcast to talk about what are the things that you should be thinking about when you are hiring a brand photographer, when you're planning a brand photo shoot, etc., etc. We're going to talk about it through the lens of a recent client photo shoot. This client is an event planner. She does day of wedding coordination plus full scale wedding planning. And she is in this space in her business where she's spent the time building the expertise and she has a really solid foundation for her business, but her branding doesn't match her expertise or skill that she provides to her clients. And so when she came to me, she needed photos that highlight who she is, her expertise, her warmth, while also communicating what types of couples are her ideal client. Before we ever talk about photography, we talk about what it is that the brand is trying to communicate. Who are you? What do you stand for? What types of clients are you trying to attract? Where are you currently in your business? All of these elements help in guiding what types of photos we decide to create for your business. So my client Cara came to me ready to up level her brand into its next elevated version. The thing that really stood out to me when Cara came to me is that what she was trying to communicate when we talked about who she was as a brand was already in her branding. What we needed to do was we needed to refine it and bring it more to the surface. The thing that makes Cara's brand very different and special is that she really does truly work with a range of couples who fall outside of the ideals of like a traditional wedding style aesthetic. You know, very traditional type sense of like wedding design. Whereas with Cara, her clients are very diverse. A lot of her weddings have different cultural influences because her couples have different heritages and customs that they are bringing from their parents. And then she also works with clients who are in the LGBTQIA community. So, what we really wanted to do was bring forward more of those elements of her brand, which would signal to her ideal client that I'm the wedding planner for you, couples who love the idea of getting married, want to have this amazing celebration, but don't want to be pushed into the box of traditional wedding type things. So as I mentioned, before we even get into photos we are going to create, I help my clients assess where the disconnect in what it is that they're saying they want to communicate and what is actually being communicated. So when I talked with Cara, one of the very first things that I did was I reviewed her website and I reviewed her social media presence and helped her see where some of the content that she was sharing was going against the types of clients she wanted to attract. So we looked at what was working great for her and what could we improve to lock in that communication even further. And this is where we kind of get into this idea of you can have beautiful images and photos, but they can be communicating things that aren't aligned with who you are as a brand. And when we talk through the context of Cara and her branding, one of the things that she does have is she's not just working with non traditional wedding couples, she's also working with a lot of couples who do have traditional type weddings. And she's not saying that she doesn't want to work with those, but she wants to attract more clients who want to be in that creative space when they are thinking about their wedding design. And as I was looking at her website, that was one of the biggest things that I realized was that we needed to capture more content that leaned into the creative side of wedding planning and wedding design. And the current client work that she's already pushed it a little bit back. So let's talk about the creative direction. What did we decide to do for her brand photo shoot in order to create the aesthetic and the vibe? After we did some digging as to what it was that she wanted to communicate with her brand, which is this element of storytelling. She wants to capture people and kind of highlight this element of the day, the feeling, the vibe, the energy of these different types of weddings, while also highlighting her as a professional who is warm, approachable, kind. When we were building out the creative direction, which is what is it that we're actually capturing for the shoot in order to meet the brand goals, we decided that we needed to highlight two different types of weddings fall into non-traditional type weddings that fit her ideal client. We went with two different wedding types. We decided to do whimsy, color, dramatic, chic. When we think about those two examples, what I want to highlight is that when we think about traditional weddings, we see roses and type of bouquet that is very traditional. And so when we were designing the creative concept for these weddings, we wanted to get into fun elements that make them different from traditional weddings. We decided was we were going to really focus on different elements of the tablescape design. So, what does the dinnerware look like, and how is that communicating whimsy or drama? What are the florals? What types of flowers are inside of the bouquet that communicates whimsy or drama? What does the wedding dress look like? How is the tux designed? These are all design elements that we had to consider when we were thinking about communicating what types of couples are going to be attracted to these aesthetics. So, when we're thinking about the creative direction and communicating that, there were three main elements that went into play. One was location. We needed to pick a location that is going to give the creative vibe. So, we're not going into a church, we're not going into a traditional type wedding venue. We're not going into a barn. We were looking for something that had this modern, industrial, contemporary art type vibe. So that was the first thing. The next thing we needed to really focus on was obviously the props. So props in this case was the actual tablescape design, florals, and the final wardrobe for the couples. And then lastly, what we needed to focus on was the actual way in which we captured photos, iconic photos of the couple that tell more of that story. So for that part, what I made the decision to focus on was movement, color, and then really dynamic portraits that were very editorial. So editorial for the drama chic couple, and then for the whimsy and colorful couple, we really focused on kind of playful poses, movement in the poses. And I played a little bit with double exposure because that is more creative in the photography world. One element that we spent a lot of time going back and forth on was whether or not we needed to highlight the actual behind the scenes of her engaging with a couple during the planning phase. But due to time constraints, we ended up deciding not to do that because we realized that the bang for our buck in the sense that we were going to get more use out of those creative photos with those couples that we were kind of creating those weddings versus couple behind the scenes where when you say it, it sounds very simple, but when you think about the logistics of adding in another couple, scheduling, wardrobe, communicating what the direction is, styling a whole new scene that is going to emulate or create the idea that there's this behind the scenes of Cara working with her couples, you realize that that's actually not as easy as it sounds. And it takes a lot of time away from the other creative concepts that we had created for her. Once we locked in the creative direction, it was time to find our couples and to build the creative team for this brand photo shoot specifically because we were essentially creating too many weddings. We had a lot of creative people that we needed to have on our team. So we ended up working with a florist, two hair and makeup artists, two different wardrobe companies. We worked with one that specifically sold dresses and one that was a tux shop. We worked with a cake designer. We worked with the venue location. We worked with a party rental company for the dinnerware, the tables, the chairs, the tablecloths, all the things that go into planning and styling an event. It was all hands on deck planning that took a lot of reaching out, coordinating, and collaborating. When you're thinking about the level of brand shoot that you are aiming to do for yourself, one of the big things that I would recommend is deciding how much you need or how far you're willing to go before you even work or reach out to a photographer. I'm always of the mind that if you're going to do it, you should do the work that time instead of foregoing a decision where a year down the road, you're going to wish that you had done something. So in this case, with Cara, what we really needed to focus on was we had to execute on a really high level design vignette for each of those different wedding themes in order for her to get the most from all of this work that she was already doing behind the scenes. When you are looking to build a creative team, there are two ways to think about this, and not everyone's going to have that many people involved in the creative team. It really just depends on your branding and what it is that you need in order to execute on that. But for her in this instance, what she decided to do was she collaborated with each of those people, which means they provided the materials. She paid for any of the hard costs that it would take for them. And then in return, they get to use some of the images that we have created in their own marketing. Now, when you're thinking about doing this, one of the biggest concerns that you need to keep in mind is the collaboration piece with the photographer. As the person who is paying to get these photos created, you are the one that is paying for the commercial use of those images. And in my contract specifically, because I want to respect the investment that my client is making into this, I am very clear that if people are going to be using these images for their own business in their own commercial way to create business, there has to be some licensing restrictions or terms of use around those images because they haven't paid. Yes, they did offer some of their work to that, but ultimately they aren't paying the actual fee to use those images. And so in that case, you always want to double check and make sure with your photographer if it's okay for you to give those photos to someone else. In this case, Cara and I had talked about it ahead of time. And because I really wanted this to be an amazing photo shoot and I wanted lots of people to kind of benefit from the creative design, we talked about how we would give some of the photos to each of the people who contributed, and then the cost of using those images in their marketing is simply just attributing me as the photographer for those photos. So there is that element to also take into consideration when you are kind of designing your brand photo shoot. So now that we've talked a little bit about the creative direction that went into designing the photo shoot, I want to talk about the types of photos that you should be thinking about for your photo shoot. So when my clients come to me, the first thing I do is a brand audit of their website, which I mentioned earlier. I look at their website and I look to see where are there holes in the visuals. What visuals do they have? Are they working? And what extras do we need? When I'm looking at websites, first thing you want to be thinking about are your hero or header images. These images should be iconic statement images that quickly grab the attention of someone who is landing on your website for the first time and you either A, want to catch the person's attention, or B, reiterate something that they've already known about you, because there's going to be two types of people coming to your website: cold people who have no idea who you are but have searched and found you through Google, or people you are already connected with who you are directing to your website. So that's the first thing. The next type of photo that you need to be thinking about is the types of images that support copy but don't take away from the copy. So these types of images are detail shots or behind the scenes images of you in action, or some sort of detail, hands are in it, or sometimes no hands. These images are also really great in proposals. They're really great if you ever decide to host a workshop or give a talk, because they create consistency and it's on brand without it being a bunch of pictures of you and your face, which can feel uncomfortable if that's not the point of the presentation. So those are the three main types of images. All right, just to recap: hero images, hero or header images, your detail shots, images that aren't person focused. They may have hands, they may have things like pens or whatever is relevant to your brand. And then also behind the scenes lifestyle images. So you either working at your computer, if that's the type of work you do, you actually creating the thing, you working with your clients, all of that good stuff. Those are the three types of images that we want to focus on. Once we lock those in, the next thing we need to do is we got to get those headshots. Headshots are morphing. The first is your very standard traditional headshot. This is like the shoulder up, its face is the main focus. And this is really good, not just for your about page, but it's also really great if you ever do any guest speaking, you're doing any sort of podcast, you're doing any sort of interviews. Great image to have on hand, because people will always ask you for that photo. The next image is personality portraits. I lump this into the creative headshot or the headshot space, but these are portraits that capture you as a person who is within your business. Sometimes this is going to be more important to have, and sometimes it's going to be less important. Depending on how big you have to be with the creative direction for some of these images, you may decide that that's not something that you need in your photo shoot. I don't really remember what I'm trying to say. Once you have kind of outlined the holes in your photography on your website, you want to think about is, do you have any upcoming marketing campaigns? Some of my clients do have ads that they run on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. When you're thinking about upcoming ad marketing campaigns, which of these photos are going to work for that? And do we need to create other images specifically for those marketing campaigns? You want to find or create images specifically throughout the shoot that can work for both. But then also, depending on how hard you want to go with your marketing, you also want to create some creative images that are specifically designed for advertisements. When you're creating assets, they're called creatives for ads, you want to be thinking about negative space framing, because negative space, which is the empty space in an image, it's where you can put words or graphics on the image so that it's not competing with the subject of the image. And because every campaign or ad has a different purpose, you want to be intentional about the types of images you're creating so that it supports that purpose of the ad. I really don't. We've talked enough about types of images and creative decisions made for the direction of the photo shoot. Now, what I want to talk to you about is the actual day of the photo shoot and how to ensure that you're getting the type of images that are going to connect and communicate with your ideal client. So, the biggest piece of the puzzle, and for a lot of my clients, and possibly for you, you are actually going to be the main subject of the photo shoot. And for most of us, we get very uncomfortable when we are in front of the camera, and we get locked into how we are being perceived in the image. And I get this because, one, we're not used to seeing ourselves in photos. Two, it's very vulnerable to have to put yourself out there. And three, we live in a culture that has a lot of toxic beauty norms that, for the most part, make most of us feel really shitty about our bodies. And my counter to that and my recommendation, and this is a part of the process that I take my clients through, is decentering yourself, taking yourself out of the center of it and putting yourself in the seat of the customer. So when you are going to purchase a service or product from someone, you are not going to that website or their Instagram page and looking at it through a judgmental lens of, oh, I don't like how that person looks, or look at that little thing here in this image. Why did they even do that? No, most of us aren't that cruel, mean, or judgmental. What we're doing is we are going to their Instagram, we're going to their website, and we're asking ourselves, can this person be trusted? Would I vibe with this person? Do they feel genuine? Do they align with my values? Can they deliver on the thing that they're saying that they deliver on? And that's what we fucking care about. So, as the person who is positioning yourself in your business, what you have to really work on is kind of coming at it from the perspective of, if I were the customer, how would I feel engaging with this brand? And so the number one tip I have for you is to think about your clients and how you are with them when you're working one to one. Or if you're a product based business, what is it that you're putting into the product? What kind of love, what kind of attention, what kind of craft are you pouring into this? And that is what you're going to focus on during your photo shoot. And the reason why you're going to focus on that is because that's asking you to step into the role of the leader and the business owner that you are, who you're already being on a day to day. And that is going to help you bring forward that energy that exists without being self-conscious about how you look in the photo, right? Because what we want to accomplish is helping people trust us, helping people to get to know us. And so by embodying that energy that we already live in day to day when we're working with our clients, it's going to help the photos come off more genuine. The next thing I want to recommend when it comes to the day of photo shoot and making sure it's a success is getting honest with yourself about the things that you don't necessarily love seeing in a photo and then communicating that with the photographer. So, an example is, I have clients who have certain quirks where they're like, I don't like my ears, or I'm a little bit self conscious of my midsection, or I feel like I have thick arms, right? Your photographer isn't going to know that because your photographer is not looking at you and judging you based on your appearance. They're not thinking to themselves, well, this person has weird ears. Like, that's just not the case. They're looking at you and they're seeing you for all of the awesomeness, the beauty of who you are, and they're not picking your body apart. So, in order to get images that you are happy with, you have to communicate to the photographer, hey, this is something that I'm a little bit self conscious of. Can we be thoughtful about this during the photo shoot? This is something I do with my clients all the time. I'm like, hey, communicate with me, tell me what it is. And during the photo shoot, I will do my best to make sure that I am thinking about that when I am composing the image and putting you in these different poses so that we get more photos we love versus less. Okay, so now that I've given you some tips on how to make sure that the day of the photo shoot is successful for you when we talk about energetically and getting those photos that you love, what I want to share with you is Cara's actual words for her experience of the photo shoot. So Cara basically says that I came in to the shoot knowing that I wanted the imagery to feel editorial and aligned with my brand, but I also knew that I needed the guidance to bring that vision fully to life. Leanne stepped into that role so effortlessly. She offered direction in a way that felt natural, has great intuition, and helped shape the entire process without making it feel forced. This is the key part, right? This is where it comes through in a genuine, authentic way, is if we can make sure that we are not forcing something that is not already there. Her ability to guide while still allowing things to feel organic is what makes her work so elevated. The final images feel refined, cohesive, and completely reflective of my brand. When we are thinking about what your brand photography should do for you, they should be meeting you where you are while also propelling you to that next level in a way that feels authentic to who you are. Cara said that the two biggest changes she experienced was one, the confidence that she has in her brand, which is the most underestimated benefit of doing a brand photo shoot. We spend so much time putting work into building and nurturing our businesses. When we're able to have physical representation of that work, that energy, the expertise, the professionalism, the level of confidence that comes with that is unmatched. And because of the work that we did, the second thing that changed for her is that her brand now matches visually to the way that she feels about it in her head. And honestly, that's one of the most important parts of the work that we do together. Alrighty, that's all I have for you today. I hope that this was helpful to you. I hope you got some nuggets of information when it comes to planning your own photo shoot, learning about what goes into a brand photo shoot, and gives you guidance when choosing a brand photographer to work with. As always, remember, you got this dang thing, and I will see you next time.